In the early 1960s, a U.S. Air Force pilot by the name of Ed Dwight Jr. received an overwhelming amount of mail congratulating him on becoming the first African American astronaut candidate. Despite the publicity and hype, Dwight never had the opportunity to go to space. I'll tell you about it coming up. This is KRT, Critical Race Theory. It's not the one they teach in law schools, but the one banned in public schools. At the time, Ed Dwight was working as a test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base, where he trained in the Aerospace Research Pilot School run by aviation icon Chuck Yeager. Edwards was known as the premier flight test facility of the Air Force, where test pilots like Gus Grissom, Gordon Cooper, and Neil Armstrong trained in experimental jets. During his time at Edwards, Dwight flew supersonic aircraft like the Lockheed F-104 Starfighter, which allowed him to observe the curvature of the Earth from the high atmosphere. Dwight's participation in the astronaut selection process caught the attention of many, including Whitney Young, executive director of the National Urban League, who arranged speaking tours and interviews for Dwight with black publications such as Ebony and Jet. The national attention led to increased public pressure for Dwight to be selected as a NASA astronaut, and the Kennedy administration saw his potential as an important symbolic achievement for both the White House and the nation. In 1961, a Soviet cosmonaut became the first human to orbit the Earth in his spaceship Vostok 1. Edward R. Murrow, Kennedy's director of the United States Information Agency, saw an opportunity to regain American prestige in space by putting the first non-white man in space. He suggested to NASA Administrator James Webb that if they enrolled and trained a qualified black astronaut and flew him in whatever vehicle was available, they could retail the entire space effort to the non-white world. Kennedy encouraged all military branches to improve diversity among their officers. As Morrow pushed for a black astronaut, Edward Dwight was becoming a top candidate. Dwight had risen to the rank of captain in the Air Force and had enough flying hours to qualify for the flight test school at Edwards. Dwight had shown an interest in art and airplanes from a young age, and his desire to fly was inspired by seeing a photo of a black pilot who had been shot down in Korea. As a talented artist, Dwight received a scholarship from the Kansas City Art Institute. However, his father insisted that he become an engineer, stating that it was a more lucrative career. After graduating from Bishop Ward as the first African American male in 1951, Dwight earned an associate's degree in engineering in 1953 from Kansas City Junior College. Later that same year, he enlisted in the Air Force and progressed steadily, moving between bases in Texas, Missouri, and Arizona. Although he helped develop technical manuals and train pilots on various aircraft instruments, he was not allowed to be a squad leader because of his race. Despite this, he graduated with an aeronautical engineering degree from Arizona State University in 1957 and ultimately accumulated over 9,000 hours of flight time, including 2,000 in high-performance jets. His engineering background and extensive training allowed him to enter the test pilot school at Edwards. As the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1 in 1957, the beginning of the space race sparked the interest of Dwight and millions of people around the world. However, America's self-image as a nation of liberty and opportunity was tarnished by the segregation and Jim Crow laws that perpetuated poverty and injustice for most African Americans. The Kennedy administration believed that having a black astronaut would be a powerful symbol of opportunity for African Americans. However, at Edwards, Dwight faced discrimination and ridicule. Chuck Yeager, the head of the flight test school, claimed that Dwight was only accepted because of preferential treatment and that he only passed the first part of the course with the help of instructors. Like everybody else was born knowing how to fly a spaceship. It's a school. That's what they do there. Yeager recounted in his autobiography that he was under intense pressure from the White House, Congress, and civil rights groups to admit a black student. Dwight was one of 26 applicants to the second phase of the course, but he was not initially accepted. However, the Air Force Chief of Staff, Curtis LeMay, informed Yeager that the White House and Attorney General Robert Kennedy wanted an African American in the astronaut training program. The number of accepted students was increased from 11 to 15, and Dwight was included, along with 3 more white pilots. According to space historian John Logsdon in the History of Spaceflight Quarterly, Dwight was the only African American among the 26 applicants. As Dwight progressed through the training, he applied for NASA's astronaut program and was recommended by the Air Force along with 25 other candidates. However, out of the 136 total applicants, only 14 were selected for NASA's Astronaut Group 3 in October 1963, and Dwight was not one of them. Frustrated by this outcome, Dwight wrote a letter directly to the White House, bypassing the military chain of command. This move was apparently in response to a comment made by Gordon Cooper, one of the original Mercury 7 astronauts, that NASA had not found a qualified African American to be an astronaut. Thomas McElmurray, Yeager's deputy at Edwards, later said that Dwight was capable of being a good astronaut and that he was the logical choice if it was important to the country to have a minority in space. However, someone in the country did not deem it important enough to choose Dwight for the astronaut program at that time. Just a month after the announcement of Astronaut Group 3, which included Dwight's classmate David Scott, who eventually walked on the moon during Apollo 15, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Following this event, Dwight was reassigned from Edwards and ultimately resigned from the Air Force in 1966. Following the assassination of Kennedy, the pressure on NASA to send a black astronaut into space decreased. It would take another 2 decades for Guyon Bluford to become the first African American to fly in space on NASA's 8th Space Shuttle mission in 1983. During the period between Dwight's NASA application and Bluford's flight, the relationship between the space agency and black Americans was often inconsistent and tumultuous. Meanwhile, Ed Dwight had been designing memorials and sculptures worldwide for 4 decades. Among his works are Underground Railroad memorials situated in Michigan, Canada, and New Jersey. Despite the Black History Month, the stories of figures such as Dwight were not taught in schools, libraries, or museums. I can believe that. Through his art, Dwight aims to commemorate the history of African Americans. His legacy as the first black astronaut candidate should be remembered alongside the subjects of his work. This has been Critical Race Theory. Thanks for checking in. Please like and subscribe and share this video with your friends and family. I'll see you next time.